episode that is launched is one that I have kept in my back pocket, so to speak, for a while. It was one of the first interviews that I did, and it's extra special to me because in listening to my guest tell of her journey, it so mirrored my own. And so much of the points that she made, I could just feel so much in my heart. And I'm looking forward to you hearing of her journey and different points that she makes on. She's vulnerable. She opens up. She speaks, from her heart about certain things, and that's very special to me. And I it's one reason why I'm doing this podcast, so that you can hear from different people and their journey and how they moved through things and what worked for them, and hopefully you can take away something that will serve you and help you. So my guest is a yoga teacher. She is a life coach. She is a podcast host, and she is a fellow Southern girl. And as I told her, that I've made it a rule now that once you've been in the South for 2 years, you can consider yourself a Southern gal. So let's hear what Laurie Mendenhall has to tell us all today. Thank you for listening. Good morning, and actually, good morning, happy Monday. I love Mondays, the beginning of the week. Welcome to Your Life, Your Way podcast. And I could not be happier on this Monday morning, first Monday after Christmas, last Monday before the new year, to have with me Laurie Mendenhall, who is a fellow Southern gal, born and raised in North Carolina, oldest of 4. And I had said to her in the beginning when we were chatting beforehand that I've made it a rule that after you've been in the South for 2 years, you can consider yourself a Southern gal, as I am in Aiken, South Carolina. But I'm very excited to hear Laurie's path, her journey, her story, because her path and her journey is very warm to my own heart, as it includes yoga, meditation, life coaching, and Reiki. How it served Laurie in her journey through life's, I call them daily pokes, stresses, and sometimes life's major changes. So I'm going to let Laurie take over and give us an idea of who she is, where she came from, where she's going. And I'm so excited to have you, Laurie. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll be honest, this is my first interview, so to speak. This is my first podcast invitation. So I'm really excited to be here. There is one thing about me, I do love to talk. So I was actually even sharing your podcast with some of our other fellow podcasters just yesterday. So I'm Laurie. I was born and raised in High Point, North Carolina. I live in the Piedmont. I still live here. My husband and I spend our vacations and our off downtime in Orlando. And I'm a life coach. I'm a registered yoga teacher. I am a Reiki practitioner. And my story to get from where I was to here is because of my own personal life coach. And it came from this time last year. She had become gravely ill with cancer. And just a couple of months prior to that, we had talked about, I was finally going to be open to, okay, maybe this is my true calling. Because I am the person that has poo-pooed off my true calling my entire life. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. I know there's something else, right? I talk about this, in the first episode of my podcast. She asked me if I could do what she does, and I would always say yes. I had been working with her since I was 25. I'm 51, so if that tells you anything. So for half of my life, I had this wonderful life coach, and we were planning on, doing things together and working on some stuff in the new year of this past year. And I was very excited. I had started doing yoga. I had done yoga before, but I'd started doing yoga in December of last year. And by February, I had decided that I wanted to take the teacher training more to expand my knowledge of yoga than to actually be a yoga teacher. I'll go back to that later, but the experiences that I was having in these yoga classes with letting go of all of the crap that I had been stuffing down. And let me tell you, I like to stuff it down with a spoonful of something sweet usually. I like to stuff all of my emotions down my throat to keep from doing anything. And during these meditations at the end of your yoga class, a lot of people don't know this, but yoga is movement of your body to focus. It helps your brain settle and focus. So when you do Shavasana, whether you do it for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or 30 minutes within Yoga Nidra, you can actually get into meditation. And I am maybe too excited that I can almost fall asleep. I catch myself snoring. I don't think I'm asleep, but then I'll hear myself snore and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited that I can get to that place that I'm supposed to be in meditation. And so I was so excited. I was like, oh, called Jane. I was like, Jane's my life coach. I have had this breakthrough, this amazing thing. I've been letting stuff go. And she was like, great. She's like, you know what? I'm in the hospital trying to get better. That's what she would tell me. She not one time ever told me that she was terminal. I knew it in the back of my head, but didn't want I didn't want to deal with it, and probably still don't want to deal with it. It took me probably 2 months into yoga teacher training to realize that, excuse me, I've just realized I've got some of my breakfast on my shirt. Very normal. See, I'm very normal, people. I just finished eating my oatmeal and there we go. Sorry about that. I sat straight up in bed one morning. Like I woke up and was like, oh, she's dying. And it was all of this emotional stuff that came to me. But it was because I had uncovered some of that other stuff that I finally came to that realization. And at that point, I was nervous. I was very nervous about what I was doing. I was very fearful. She died right around the time I finished my teacher training. And I still don't feel like she's gone. Like I still have a voicemail from her on my phone that I'm not willing to let go of. We went, so I started going to, I have a friend that's a Reiki master. And so I started going to her. She was having a special, but I hadn't really done Reiki before. My massage therapist is a Reiki master, but I never really put that all together. And this is not the same person. So I went to see my friend Caroline, and she worked on me, and I had some, Reiki is I love how she explains it. It's a Japanese stress reliever.
Definitely.
I think that's a very good way to explain it, because when you start talking about energy work and moving energy, it makes a lot of people nervous. But once you experience it and you can feel yourself clear and your thoughts are clearer, your heart's clearer, you don't feel so heavy, you tend to want to go back for more because you feel so good.
You almost come away with understanding, even if you're not clear on what it is, there's an understanding that you can just feel and sense, I find, from my Reiki sessions.
Right. So my first session with her was more of, I don't know what this is. I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm curious about it. Right. I knew that I needed to go and try it. And the thoughts that kept popping into my head, my very first session was a hawk, a Japanese woman, which I had to go and find, I like started researching Reiki a lot after that because I wanted to figure out what that was. And I can't remember, there was something else that popped up. So I was like, okay. So a couple weeks later, I went back. I was like, I need to do this again. I think by the time we did three sessions, I knew that I needed to study Reiki and learn more about it. With Jane, we had done workshops years ago on chakra balancing and getting the spinning, with your energy. It's hard to explain for people that don't understand energy work. But we had done these things. And so I already had a very basic understanding of this and wanted to learn more. Pandemic wise, I couldn't find anybody that would teach me in person. So I took some online class, which was fine. The sun was decided to come out from behind the cloud. I couldn't find anybody to teach me in person. So I took an online class and that was fine. I will tell you that my online class certification is master teacher. And I am not knocking anyone that wants to share their knowledge, but no, I didn't have enough. I was like, there's just no. And I finally found a girl in Greensboro who was happy to let me come in one-on-one and learn from her. And I used those certifications as opposed to the ones that I got online. I also was able to practice and use my energy. And I have several friends who have allowed me to work on them and help them get cleared. Some of my fellow yoga teachers. It's very interesting to me because I have one friend who is a teacher, and the stresses that she goes through in the public school system, whenever I work on her, she's always heavy right here because she has, and I just laugh. I'm like, you have to keep your mouth shut this week, didn't you? Because it's all right here.
And that tends to be my area as well. And for somebody who likes to talk, it's amazing that that's where it is.
But I think a lot of times it's because there are things that we want to say, but we know we shouldn't, or maybe it's okay for us to have that point of view, but not necessarily share it. Unlike me, who just lets things fly, I have really learned how to not let things fly. But I tend to be stuck in my solar plexus because when you take on other people's energy, and you may feel this as well with coaching, you get blocked up in your solar plexus because you've got your energy trying to flow with all this other energy that you've absorbed. This kind of blocking everything off.
Sometimes the ebb and flow isn't so graceful. It can be a little rough.
Right.
Until you are able to clear. Yes.
Absolutely. And emotions and other things can play into that. You could have a bad day at work and carry that around with you for who knows how long. I'm a big fan of journaling, and I journal every day. And after I started the Reiki study, I used to have a separate journal that was my gratitude journal, but I now began my journaling with gratitude. And I found today in my journaling that there was something that I was holding on to, and it was a house that I lived in like 10 or 12 years ago that I was attached to. And something that had been said at Christmas at my parents' house, I was kind of holding on to that, like, what did they mean by that? And I realized that it was still attached to that house. So today I started journaling, what was it that I loved about that house? And, how can I let that go and create it? I think it was this house. This was the house that I was with my first husband in. And so we did not have that house anymore because we don't have each other anymore. And that was one of those things that just made me kind of say, oh, I see all of the things that I loved about it. So let's make my house now feel that same way.
That's a beautiful awareness. And I too have gone through divorce and moved from that house. I understand the journey. How do you feel that even the yoga, the meditation, how did you know, first of all, that these were yours? I'm all about finding out what works for you. How did you realize and feel and sense that these were your path? And then how did you use them to process your life changes?
The more I did them, the more stuff I let go of. Excuse me. We always talk about in yoga class, especially when you're doing deep hip stretches like pigeon or frog or, yogi squat, anything that opens your hips, because humans carry a lot of things in their hips. We always say, while you're here, you may have some thoughts come up. Just acknowledge them and let them go. But you have to acknowledge them. You have to say, oh, I started small things, and then as I was working through yoga teacher training, so you're gonna get my full life story here. When I was in the 7th or 8th grade, I would go walking with my mom and our next door neighbor every morning. And one morning I decided I was going to jog. Now I was 13, 12 years old. And, beanpole, I was jogging down the road and I was not far in front of my mom and my neighbor, but I had turned a corner and was coming down a hill, and this pickup truck was coming up the way. It was just a little pickup truck. I could describe it to you completely, but came up, slowed down, pulled up into the parking lot just past me, and skidded to turn around like he was coming back for me. I was in my neighborhood. I was a block from my house, but I was on the back side. Like my house was here and I was over here. So I was the furthest point away from my house. So I ran around the corner and ran up the driveway of my best friend who just happened to live around the corner, and just hid until I could see my mom walk, because I knew she was coming, and that truck was not going to stop my mom from coming, right? And I came out and told her what happened, and then I don't think I ever went on a walk again for a long time. But I had carried that around, and I carried that as a fear of being kidnapped, of being sexually assaulted. I carried around all these fears that I had built up in my head. And during my yoga teacher training, during one of our meditation sessions, I felt like I let that go. And this is a true story. I sat up, and we have all these windows in the front of the yoga studio, and this pickup truck that looked exactly like that drove down the street. And I looked at them and I said, y'all, I think that just left. It just went down the street. It didn't bother me when I saw it. It was just, that was kind of, I just kept having these little things that were showing me that I was on the right path.
Love it.
And the Reiki even more so. I see my massage therapist every other week, because as I've gotten older, I've realized that I do need self-care and self-preservation. And that is like, I don't go to the salon and get my nails done. I go to the salon and get my back work, get my body worked on. That's what I prefer. And I want to say about 2 months ago, I said, are you still doing Reiki? Because I know you're a Reiki master. And she's like, yeah. I said, well, why don't we start doing this every other week? And so we started doing more Reiki, which has been helping me let go of and dig up stuff. And the first couple of times we did it, there was no conversation, but even the last 2 times we've done it, she's like, "What did you feel?" Because she wants to talk about what she felt, which I think is interesting, you know, because as a Reiki professional and knowing, I see a lot of people, they don't know what you don't know what you're dealing with the energy. You're just a conduit as a practitioner, as a master. You are just a conduit for the energy. You are just trying to open the spaces so the energy can flow freely. You don't know necessarily what you're moving, but the more she works on me, the more she knows what she doesn't know, but she knows that she's moving something because she's being called to get it out of the way, or whatever it is. She's like, I'm being told that I need to stay here until this is clear, so to speak. And that's you know and that's gotten me, those two things have really gotten me to where I am now. After that first month of Reiki of this past summer, that was when I realized I really needed to work on my coaching certifications, because I had always been a person that people just like to come and talk to, but I had never really talked about, oh yeah, I would be great at doing this. It was not something, I always felt like, oh, well, I can barely get out of my own way. How can I help somebody?
It just sort of chooses us.
It does.
Mhm. Definitely.
And I believe that Jane was leading me to that point, but she ran out of time, because that was what her purpose was. And I almost feel like that's exactly how I got there, because she was like, look, I can only bring you to the water. You got to drink it. You got to be the one to do it. And I think that's really how I got here. It's very interesting for me because of starting it with yoga. I feel like now that I've been teaching it for a little bit, that I had gotten past being able to serve myself with it. So I have decided to not teach yoga anymore. I will teach private lessons. I would be glad to work with anyone, but I don't want to be locked into a teaching schedule. I do work full time outside of all of this. Um, but that I want to do more. I want to focus on the coaching and on the sharing and the helping people, because like we talked about a little bit ago, you don't know who you're going to touch, who may hear your story
Exactly.
and say, oh, I thought it was just me. And you get that. I have tons of friends in AA. It's the same thing. You don't know who you're gonna reach with your story. You don't know who may hear you and go, oh, that might be their light bulb moment.
And it might be the fact that what you and I could say the exact same thing in guiding our clients. However, my voice, my energy might not be the one they need to hear or that speaks to them. But boy, saying the same thing from you, boom.
Right.
And that's the beauty of having so many of us that are holding space for me. I haven't asked you. I mean, I work strictly with women, but it's about holding that space so that they feel safe in finding their way. And it has to be the right voice and connection.
Exactly. And you never know. I mean, it blows me away the amount of people that I have met and connected with just this year on this journey to getting there. I almost named my podcast Getting There, but but I felt like speaking my truth was a little bit more on point, because I find that as a human being, we are fearful of being judged. We are afraid to be who we're supposed to be. And our environment kind of encourages that. It encourages you to fit your square peg into this round hole, instead of, being the person that you're supposed to be. And that's it took me 50 years, but I feel like I'm getting there.
In the journey, it is a lifetime. It is a life process. And that's why we never get there. It's a continuation. And I think probably, if I had to pick one favorite part of it, is it becomes fun. That's my word. I get jazzed. It's fun. If I'll use the word triggered by something, which happened to me just not too long ago. And I ended up saying to the woman that I was speaking with, apparently there's a little something I still need to work on. Because it's not something that then I go down that rabbit hole of, oh, you're awful, look what you did, you said, you felt. It's, oh, okay, where'd that come from? And it's a much smoother and easier process to move through it and say, thank you, I appreciate the lesson. Or I call it the review process. But it gets easier. Just gets easier.
Yes. And I hate it when I have to go, oh, why did I say that? I hate that, because I'm like, oh, I'm trying so hard to learn and to be better. And, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's okay. You're still moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And it's more experience too, as you understand. I feel it gives you more clarity on offering your story to someone who you can say, look, it's okay. We do fall down, and it is a review process. And there's just a little something else you need to take away from that. And you have the tools. Yes, you have the certifications. Yes, but you have your life experience. You have everything that you've been through. And there's so many lessons in that. How do you want to move forward in helping your clients based on your life experience and the tools that you've learned and developed?
I think that for me, it's to help people understand that perfection is a myth. If I sat around any longer and waited for things to just be perfect, nothing would ever happen. I would maintain my stuck and would not be able to get out of my own way. And I think that's where people do get stuck, because they always say if and when instead of let's just do this messy. And I think that we've all kind of gone through that lesson, but it's when you figure out that it's okay, when you let yourself treat yourself like you're 8 years old, say, it's okay. Just do it. Just go for it. Because that's what I would tell my nieces and nephews. Oh, just go for it.
Exactly.
Life is short. And they're like, oh, people will make fun of me and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to do it for you. And that's kind of how I've had to start treating myself, is to say, what would 8-year-old Laurie do? Or even better, what would 4-year-old Laurie do? Because 4-year-old Laurie hasn't even been made fun of yet, for anything. She's just out there having fun. And the innocence of children is so great that it's something that as adults we think that everything has to be just perfect and just right. And this past year has been me learning that it's okay just to be, that it doesn't have to be perfect, that nothing is perfect. And if things go off course, that's okay. Instead of the 30-year-old Laurie that would be like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. We're late. We're 5 minutes late. This is a disaster. It's not. It's all good.
Most of what we create in our mind does not happen.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about your podcast.
Okay. Well, my podcast is launching on January 5th, and it is called Speak Your Truth. My life coach always said that it was the most important to speak your truth, stand in your light, be who you are meant to be. And I could not think of a more fitting title for me, not only to stand up and actually speak my truth, to have a honest conversation. My podcast right now is just me talking about different subjects that I think are important for people to know about. The first of which is the first episode is a get to know me. You might actually get to know me more on this podcast than you know in that episode. But the second episode is about the fear of being seen, which a lot of people don't realize that when they're looking at things like what's keeping you from doing this. Well, the bottom line, the one single word of anything that keeps you from doing anything else is fear. Mine has always been the fear of being seen, because I was a shy child. I never liked attention on me. And I'm really excited about the podcast. I think it really shines a good light on that. When you're afraid to step out and do something, it's a lot of times you don't want people to see you. You don't want people to acknowledge you, because they may like you, but they may not. And maybe you're not willing to take that risk. The fear of being seen also comes from, to me, I find it resonates most with my weight. Like I said, I like to eat my feelings, I like to stuff them down one spoonful at a time. And that is something that I have worked on for at least the last 10 years. I'm still going up and down, but I know right now that what I have been stressing over is being seen, speaking my truth. It's a little scary, not going to lie. It's scary to step out into the world, but I have had so many people come to me that, that are my friends, and this doesn't count the multitudes of strangers that have listened to my trailer, but my friends, they're like, oh, we're so excited. I'm like, oh, now I'm like, I hope I don't disappoint you. That fear, and I call it the ego, because I think your ego feeds your fear.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just, your ego sits there and says, well, what if this doesn't work? And I have to step back and say, well, what if it doesn't? I mean, what am I not going to try? I'll never know if it doesn't, you'll never know.
Let me ask you a question, if I may, because you just
Sure.
touched on that, and taking you back to the yoga.
Mhm.
I often use we have such a similar path. It's so funny. We're going to have a cup of coffee sometime via Zoom outside of the podcast.
Anytime.
But I stopped teaching in studio as well, feeling the call to just take it to a different path. But I often the restorative yin yoga and the adaptive yoga is part of my stress and lifestyle management coaching. But I love to look at a particular pose that is the downward facing dog. And that is a wonderful example. And I'd love to hear your take on it. That is a pose where that little voice that you're talking about, that ego that always says, you can't do that, get out of that, don't do that, you're going to be hurt, or you can't do that, who do you think you are, you're to this. That voice tends to speak very loudly in downward facing dog, because it's a position of vulnerability. It's you're upside down, but you're down, and it can be very awkward on the body to be in that position. And I have found that voice just screams in that position. And in working with clients, it's like, okay, get to know that voice, because that's the one that is saying those things to you, like what you're speaking of right now, Laurie, and getting to know that voice versus ego versus what is your intuition? What is your soul telling you? How do you find in certain yoga poses that you hear that voice? You know the voice because you're just talking about it. We all hear it.
Right. Right. I find that voice not necessarily in downward facing dog. And I don't know why, because you're right, it's a very vulnerable pose, but maybe that's a pose that I know that I can do, that I'm strong in, that, you know, I've got my hands out, you know. I find that voice coming to me more in any kind of wheel or camel, anywhere. So you talk about vulnerability, anywhere where I'm opening my heart.
Mhm.
That is a very good light bulb moment you've just given me, because I had not thought about that. Any of those poses where I am, any heart opening poses is very, those are more vulnerable for me. And I find them to be harder, and I don't do them a lot.
Avoidance, another conversation for another time.
It's a whole nother conversation. Yeah, there are things that I avoid in my yoga practice. The things that I like to do are the hip openers. You know, all of the hip opening poses I love. It's like I have become so obsessed with letting stuff go that I'm protecting my heart.
Do you feel that's become those poses, hip openers, have become your new comfort zone?
Possibly, yes. One of the classes that I was teaching once a month, which I may still teach those, we call it yoga for runners, but it is more hip opening poses. It is more stuff like that instead. So now I'm going to have to rethink that. I'm going to have to start doing a bunch of heart opening, you know, for my own practice, just so I can become more comfortable with my emotions.
And recognizing, and I think you already, we do recognize that voice. It's whether we want to admit it or not, and
Right.
honor it.
Right.
But developing a new relationship with it, finding that new relationship with fear, that fear can be our friend. It's meant to be in the very beginning of life. It was meant to be a source of support. And that journey, and it sounds like you've done that so much with even back the little girl with the truck. That is a perfect example. Fear protected you there. You knew exactly instinct what to do.
Right.
And
right. Absolutely.
Everything you're doing, the energy work, yoga is also energy work, the meditation, everything is about developing that new relationship, which you've done on the mat, you've done off the mat. And I think it's beautiful, your story and the journey that you're on, and the fact that you're going to be holding space for others to find their way.
Thank you. I'm excited. It's something definitely out of my comfort zone, but it's something that I also feel completely at home with. Completely.
Wonderful. Wonderful. How, if someone would like to continue the conversation with you, how might they be able to find you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram. I am at Laurie Mendenhall. I am on Facebook. I have a Speak Your Truth podcast page. I have a Laurie Mendenhall coaching page. And I also, if you go to my Instagram, which is probably the easiest way, there is a link tree, and it will take you to anywhere that you can connect with me in the bio area. Or you can reach me at Laurie Mendenhall coaching at gmail.com.
And I will definitely have your link tree link in the notes so that people can reach out to you.
Yeah, and my website will be included in there as well. I am a Jacqueline of all trades. I also am an artist, so I do have an Etsy page.
Uh,
um,
what type
just
of artist?
I mostly do watercolors.
Beautiful, nice.
I also do marker illustrations. I have found that I really just love to doodle, and so that is another form of meditation for me.
Mhm.
Um, and I have pulled that into my yoga practice. Um, Not necessarily in my yoga classes, but uh, the studio where I became a yoga teacher and have taught, we have a yoga retreat. We went on one this past fall. We're going on one in the spring, and I bring the creative mind to the table. I brought uh, mandalas for everyone to color, some meditation to go along with that. And for the spring, I'm excited about some things that I found that I want to bring as well, because coloring is meditation. And it was interesting because we used it as an icebreaker for the weekend. And it was something that every time we were eating, if we weren't on the beach, people would just be sitting there coloring, and it was a lot of fun.
Nice, lovely. We'll be anxious to hear more about the retreat once it happens.
Yeah.
If you could leave one final for our listeners, what would it be? One final little tip or support or advice?
To me, I don't know that I have one tip of advice, but if you feel like you're stuck, don't be afraid to reach out to someone to help get you unstuck. Because if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be sitting here. And I also am a big believer in support groups. I like groups of women that come together for the same purpose, to just help each other. I have a little podcasting group. There's 5 of us, and the first time I ever sat on a Zoom with those five other women, I was like, I looked at all of them and I was like, I don't know what y'all believe. I was like, but I'm pretty sure that this was meant to be. So trust your gut. How's that?
There you go. Perfect. Well, Laurie, thank you so much. I have so enjoyed your company, your energy, your spirit. So I'm looking forward to your podcast. You said January 5th.
Yes,
Speak your truth. We'll be looking for that. And please come back down the road and we'll have a part 2.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was so much fun.
It was a pleasure. Very honored to have you. Thank you so much, Laurie Mendenhall. And we will look forward to the podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for listening today. I had a couple of takeaways of my own. Trust in your gut. Definitely pay for it when I don't. And when you're feeling stuck, seek support. Don't be afraid to reach out to a mentor or friends or even professional support if you need. I will leave Laurie's Linktree information in the show notes. If you found value in today's episode, I would love it if you would please share with friends and family and do subscribe. When you subscribe and leave a review and stars, it does help us boost the podcast, reach more people, and of course, serve more people. Thank you so much again. I wish you much joy and peace and blessings.